They say Paris is the city of love, light, and every predictable cliché. For me, however, it turned out to be the city of revelation. Your husband is taking his ex-girlfriend instead of you. I uncovered this delightful truth one Thursday morning. Not through confession or confrontation, but through a misplaced airline confirmation email. Yes, an email. Because nothing quite announces that romance is officially dead like discovering your 10-year marriage has been a farce thanks to your spam folder. Daniel, my husband, bless his oblivious heart or complete lack thereof, had left his laptop open. And there it was staring back at me from the screen like a neon sign flashing, "You've been replaced." The subject line read, Parisian gala, flight and hotel confirmation for Daniel Langford and Tessa Ward. Tessa Ward. The same Tessa he once swore was just an old college friend who occasionally appeared in his messages like a recurring rash. Except she wasn't a rash. She was a full-blown existential crisis, complete with first-class tickets to the City of Lights. My first reaction wasn't to cry. Oh no, tears are for beginners. Instead I blinked slowly. Once. Twice. Then I laughed. A low broken sound that probably resembled a hyena choking on a cracker. Because honestly, what else can you do when your life morphs into a bad sitcom? You laugh until your stomach aches, because the alternative might be bursting into ironic flames. I zoomed in on the details. First-class seats, a boutique hotel suite near the Eiffel Tower, the Gala de Lourdes de Rêves, some high-end charity event likely dedicated to antique doorknobs or something equally pretentious. This wasn't a casual fling. It was a fully orchestrated romantic escape, carefully planned down to the last detail. And it was supposed to be our 10th anniversary trip. Daniel had brushed off the idea weeks ago, mumbling about deadlines and promising, "Maybe next year, honey." Well, next year, honey, you'll be lucky to find room on the couch, or in a very expensive doghouse. I could almost picture him practicing French in front of the bathroom mirror. Bonjour, ma chérie, while I was at home battling a clogged drain or assembling another flat-pack disaster. The sheer gall of it all took my breath away. It felt as if he'd taken our decade together, crumpled it into a ball, and set it alight with a designer lighter, just for sport. The absurdity was almost poetic. Here I was, Harper, the woman who'd spent 10 years pretending to care about Daniel's golf stories and his mother's passive-aggressive remarks, suddenly sidelined for someone named Tessa. Tessa, who, if memory served, wore too much glitter and talked exclusively about her rescue poodle. Really, Daniel? You traded a woman who could fix a faucet and bake a flawless apple pie for a glitter-obsessed dog devotee? My self-esteem wasn't shattered. It was simply perplexed. It felt like being told you weren't fit for a role, only to discover it went to a sentient potato. My mind, ever the chaotic circus of cynicism, began spinning headlines. Local woman discovers husband's Parisian rendezvous, considers life as a cat owner, or wife replaced by ex-girlfriend. The new face of midlife crisis? I could already hear my friends gasping over wine, their sympathy dripping with useless pity. "Oh, Harper, I'm so sorry," they'd say, and I'd shrug. "Don't be. I finally have a fantastic opening chapter for my memoir." The email that changed everything. The outrage simmered beneath the surface, but it was quickly overshadowed by an unexpected sense of freedom. For years, I had played the background character in Daniel's grand production, the dependable wife orbiting his ambitions and his family's expectations. But suddenly, I was the lead in a dark comedy, and the story had just taken a turn. The universe had handed me lemons, and I wasn't about to make lemonade. I planned to craft a Molotov cocktail of citrus and satisfaction. The thought of Daniel and Tessa sipping champagne on a Parisian balcony made me grin. They were likely imagining moonlit walks along the Seine, whispering sweet nothings under the Eiffel Tower's glow. Little did they know, their romantic getaway was about to become an episode of awkward reality TV starring me. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was reclaiming my story. Because being unseen doesn't make you powerless. It gives you time to watch, to think, to sharpen your words into weapons. And mine were about to cut deep. Daniel believed he was traveling with a secret. What he didn't realize was that some secrets have a way of arriving uninvited. In designer heels, no less. And with a surprising +1. The game had officially begun, and I wasn't just playing to win. I was playing to make sure everyone else lost spectacularly. I'd been made a fool of. And to think I once believed my Uncle Raymond was the family clown with his terrible magic tricks and even worse wardrobe choices. Turns out Daniel had been auditioning for that title all along. And he'd just taken the gold medal in the Make Your Wife Look Like an Idiot Olympics. The email wasn't merely a confirmation. It was the spark that lit everything that followed. It was a digital slap across the face. A public announcement of my insignificance. And the worst part? It wasn't even shocking. It was simply the grand finale of a 10-year performance where I'd played the family's designated doormat. My mother-in-law, Margaret, loved to say that family was everything. "Harper, dear," she'd coo, "you're part of our family now." She said it as though she were granting me a rare honor, not assigning me the permanent role of unpaid domestic assistant and emotional punching bag. To her, I'd never measure up to her beloved Daniel, or to any of his ex-girlfriends for that matter. She never missed a chance to remind me that Tessa had been her favorite. Tessa was so vivacious, Harper. So sparkly, she'd sigh. Understated, in Margaret's language, meant I wish you were less yourself and more like the woman my son actually wanted to marry but settled for instead. The microaggressions had been piling up for years like dirty laundry left too long in the basket. Daniel wasn't much better. His dismissive shrugs when I spoke about my work, his forgetfulness around our anniversaries, our birthdays, my existence, all painted the same picture. He'd undermine my opinions in front of his family, only to tell me later that I was overreacting. Classic gaslighting. He made me feel like I was losing my grip for expecting something as simple as respect, or perhaps a husband who could remember my name without checking the engraving inside his wedding band. "Are you sure I said that, Harper? You're always so dramatic." Oh, I was dramatic, was I? Just wait until my grand entrance in Paris, darling. That would redefine drama. And the family? No better. My sister-in-law Lila, the one who claimed to be my confidant, had a remarkable talent for accidentally revealing details about Daniel's history with Tessa. "You know, Daniel and Tessa used to go to Paris every year," she'd chirp with a sugary smile, as though she were sharing a sweet anecdote instead of twisting the knife in my already bleeding confidence. I'd just nod, forcing a polite grin while silently applauding her for winning the award for Best Supporting Actress in Passive Aggression. I, on the other hand, was merely an extra in a production I hadn't realized I was cast in. One dinner in particular stood out. Daniel, drunk on nostalgia, and several glasses of wine, began reminiscing about a trip to Rome with Tessa. "She just got me, you know?" he slurred, staring at me as if I were a decorative lamp. "We had this incredible connection. Like two halves of a whole." I chewed my roasted chicken slowly, torn between hurling the gravy boat at him or quietly setting myself ablaze. Instead, I smiled tightly and murmured, "How quaint." The irony in that room could have been spread on toast. His neglect hadn't just been emotional, it was painfully real. Daniel was always too busy for vacations, date nights, or even a simple evening conversation. Yet somehow he'd managed to carve out time for a romantic Parisian escape with Tessa. It was as though he had a secret doorway to a parallel universe, one where he was a loving, attentive partner. I just wasn't part of that world. I'd become so invisible that I probably didn't even show up in family photos, just a faint blur, maybe a smudge on the lens. The manipulation had been gradual, quiet, and deliberate. He'd promise we'll go to Europe next year, Harper, I promise, then conveniently forget or blame his workload, or worse, my unrealistic expectations. Whenever I suggested spending time together, he'd sigh and play the martyr. "Don't you understand how stressed I am, Harper? I'm trying to provide for us." Provide for us? Please. He'd been providing for his double life. Sometimes I suspected he wanted me to leave, but he didn't have the courage to end it himself. Instead, he kept loading the metaphorical gun, one small betrayal at a time, waiting for me to pull the trigger. But here's the thing about being made a fool of: eventually it teaches you. It makes you sharper, colder, maybe even funny. Years of being ignored, belittled, and gaslit had given me a peculiar sense of humor. Every slight became a setup. Every betrayal a punchline. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a comedian and my life was the show. The true breaking point wasn't the email itself. It was realizing that this wasn't a single act of betrayal. It was a decade-long pattern. 10 years of me playing the reliable, predictable wife while Daniel lived out his fantasies on the side. I'd been so busy being supportive that I'd forgotten to be myself. And the woman I'd forgotten was no fragile thing. She was someone who didn't tolerate being treated like a decorative houseplant. So as I stared at that email, something clicked. A plan, intricate, deliberate, and wickedly clever, began to form. This wasn't about rage anymore. It was about precision. About turning their Parisian fantasy into a public spectacle they'd never forget. And it all started with one name. Tessa Ward's husband. Because if there's anything worse than being cheated on, it's realizing you've been betrayed by two people who think they're smarter than you. And if there's anything sweeter than revenge, it's revenge served with a side of comedic timing. My story wasn't just tragicomic anymore. It was evolving into a full-blown, jaw-dropping tragicomedy. And I, Harper, was ready to direct the final act. My plan was subtle, calculated, and executed with the kind of precision that would make the CIA take notes. Between coffee and donuts, naturally. Daniel and Tessa thought they were clever. They were about to learn that a woman scorned, especially one armed with a decade of quiet resentment and a taste for dark humor, is less of a victim and more of a storm. The first step was confirming Tessa's marital status. A quick, casual scroll through her public social media was all it took. Who needs a private investigator when you have Instagram? Her feed was flooded with nauseatingly sweet photos of her and her husband Marcus. Solid guy by the looks of it. Maybe a little dull, but then again so was Daniel. And look how well that turned out for me. Marcus, as it turned out, was a tech executive, which meant he was probably too busy coding to realize his wife was planning a romantic escape with her ex-perfect. Another unsuspecting victim of the universe's twisted sense of humor. At first, I imagined just showing up at the airport, a one-woman protest with a megaphone and a sign that read, "My husband is a cheater, and he's taking his ex to Paris." But that seemed messy and far too much like something a normal, emotionally stable person might do. I was neither. I was Harper, the woman who turned pain into punchlines. I needed something with more flair, more panache, something that would make Daniel's jaw drop hard enough to rattle the Parisian cobblestones. The idea of involving Marcus flickered in my mind like a rogue spark. He was the other half of this ridiculous, unknowing quartet. He deserved to know. More than that, he deserved to be part of the reveal. It would be poetic. A collaboration of the betrayed. A kind of mutual aid pact between two people who had been played for fools. We were the avengers of the deceived. Our powers sarcasm and mutual disappointment. Finding him wasn't hard. A bit of LinkedIn stalking, a quick cross-reference with Tessa's public posts, and voila. I composed the email carefully, every word deliberate, calm and cold. This wasn't a plea. It was an invitation to an exclusive, humiliating event. Subject: regarding your upcoming trip to Paris and your wife's travel companion. Body: dear Mr. Hale, I believe we have something in common. Our spouses are planning a romantic trip to Paris and have conveniently neglected to invite us. My husband, Daniel Langford, is accompanying your wife, Tessa Ward, to the Gala de Lourdes de Rêves. I have the flight and hotel confirmations. You may find this information useful. Perhaps we should discuss how to make their trip unforgettable. Sincerely, Harper Langford. It was concise, measured, and carried just the right amount of icy control. I didn't want to sound desperate. I wanted to sound strategic, a woman with a plan, not a meltdown. Marcus replied within an hour. His message was brief but steady: call me. He included his number. Our first conversation was an art piece in awkward disbelief. He was cautious, his tone tight with confusion and the first sting of betrayal. Are you sure about this? He asked, his voice low. Absolutely, I said, calm and steady. I have the receipts, literal receipts, and a decade of proof that my husband is a world-class idiot. We talked for hours, trading stories of our spouses' betrayals. It felt like a support group for the romantically cursed, only instead of therapy we shared intel. Marcus had been as oblivious as I was. Tessa had told him she was headed to Paris on a girls' wellness retreat. A wellness retreat indeed, for her conscience perhaps. It struck me that my misery wasn't unique. Betrayal was practically universal, though rarely this absurd. And sharing it with Marcus, a stranger caught in the same comedy of errors, made it oddly hilarious. We laughed at the audacity of it all, their lies, their carelessness. My wife told me she was going to a knitting convention, Marcus admitted with a dry laugh. In Paris. I should have known. I snorted. Mine said he had work commitments. Apparently, work now includes champagne and ex-girlfriends. That was when the plan took shape. We would go to Paris. Not as a couple but as allies, co-directors of Poetic Justice. We would crash their gala, make our grand entrance, and let the truth explode under the soft glow of chandeliers. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of waiting for Daniel to take me to Paris, I was finally going. With a man whose wife was cheating with my husband. It was a twisted, modern farce, the kind Shakespeare might have written if he'd known about frequent flyer miles. My dating life has really evolved, I told Marcus wryly. From dull dinners to international espionage with a stranger. At least it's not boring. He laughed, the bitterness in his tone perfectly familiar. Beneath the composure, though, I sensed a quiet anger matching my own. We weren't after violence. We wanted poetic justice, elegant, public, and unforgettable. As the departure day approached, anticipation buzzed beneath my calm. This wasn't just revenge, it was reclamation. For too long I'd been dismissed, the quiet one, the background noise. Daniel thought he knew me, thought I was too mild to fight back. He was about to learn that silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of planning. The air in Paris was crisp, carrying the scent of croissants and impending consequences. Marcus and I arrived separately, hours before the Gala de Lourdes de Rêves. We met in the lobby of a discreet hotel far from Daniel and Tessa's love nest, exchanging a glance filled with nerves and grim excitement. Ready for the show? I asked, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Born ready, he said dryly. Or at least ready enough to ruin a pleasant evening. The gala itself was a spectacle. Chandeliers glittering, conversations humming, champagne flowing like liquid gold. The air reeked of old money and new secrets. I drew a slow breath, adjusted my dress. A sleek emerald green gown that practically announced, I'm here to reclaim my dignity and look stunning doing it, and took Marcus's arm. He looked remarkably composed in his tuxedo. Tonight we weren't victims. We were the storm. A man on a mission, or perhaps a man about to experience the most awkward evening of his life. As we stepped into the ballroom, the soft murmur of conversation briefly faltered before swelling again. Curiosity rippling through the air like perfume. My eyes swept across the room, and there they were, Daniel and Tessa, looking far too comfortable, far too smug, and far too Parisian for their own good. Tessa was wrapped in a sequined gown that shimmered like a disco ball under the chandeliers, while Daniel, ever the picture of bland self-assurance, had his arm draped around her waist. They were laughing, toasting, utterly oblivious to the 2 ticking time bombs that had just entered their orbit. Daniel saw me first. His smile, that practiced veneer of charm glued to his face like a cheap toupee, began to melt away. His eyes widened, then narrowed, then nearly popped out of his head. He looked like a man who'd just seen a ghost, or worse, an unpaid credit card bill. Tessa, following his gaze, turned. Her expression shifted from radiant joy to sheer horror faster than you could whisper infidelity. It was glorious. Utterly, exquisitely glorious. Harper, Daniel stammered, his voice cracking into a pathetic squeak. What are you doing here? I offered him my brightest, fakest smile. Why, darling, I'm here for the gala. The very same one you forgot to mention. Fortunately, Marcus was kind enough to extend an invitation. I gestured toward Marcus, who gave a polite, firm nod. Tessa's painted smile evaporated. Marcus, what are you doing with her? Her voice pitched high, slicing through the polite hum of the ballroom. Heads turned. Whispers spread like wildfire. Marcus stepped forward, his tone calm and steady, the perfect counterpoint to her panic. Well, Tessa, it seems Harper and I both received some unexpected news. We simply thought we'd share the surprise and the flight. The silence that followed was so sharp you could have carved it with a butter knife. Daniel's face was a portrait of disbelief and unraveling pride. Shock, guilt, dawning comprehension. Each emotion flickered across his features as the realization sank in. His perfect secret was collapsing in front of an audience. Tessa looked seconds away from imploding into a puddle of sequins and regret. "Daniel, darling," I said sweetly, my voice laced with venomous charm, "you really should take your email security more seriously. It's astonishing what one can find in a spam folder these days, like first-class tickets and charming ex-girlfriends." A collective gasp rippled through the room. People were openly staring now, champagne glasses frozen midair. This wasn't just gossip. It was a live broadcast of marital karma. "Harper, this is highly inappropriate," Daniel hissed, attempting to tug me aside. I slipped out of his grasp. "Inappropriate?" I repeated. "What's inappropriate, Daniel, is planning a romantic getaway with your ex-girlfriend on our 10-year anniversary. This," I gestured around us, "is simply poetic justice with excellent catering." Tessa finally found her voice and shrieked. "You set us up. You two planned this." Marcus arched an eyebrow, his calm composure never wavering. "Well, when two people discover their spouses sharing a trip, it's only natural to find common ground, or in this case, common flight details." The host, a portly man in a velvet jacket, hurried over, looking completely bewildered. "Is everything all right here?" "Perfectly fine, thank you," I chirped before turning back to my audience. "Just a small domestic misunderstanding. My husband here believed Paris was large enough to hide two secrets. Turns out it isn't, especially when one of those secrets happens to sparkle." Daniel sagged against a pillar, defeated. Tessa, red-faced and trembling, stomped her foot. "This is humiliating." "Oh, sweetie," I replied, voice dripping with false sympathy. "You haven't seen humiliating yet. Humiliating is when your husband claims he's working late, but he's really at home practicing French for his mistress. This is just a Tuesday night with better lighting." The crowd, now fully enthralled, leaned in closer. Phones appeared, recording discreetly. Whispers turned into delighted commentary. "Did you hear that?" someone murmured. "His wife showed up with her husband," another whispered. "The scandal," gasped a third. It was chaos wrapped in elegance. The weight of judgment hung thick in the air, every whisper slicing into Daniel and Tessa's carefully crafted image. Watching them crumble beneath that spotlight was, in a word, magnificent. Daniel, the man who prided himself on being discreet, was now the star of a public spectacle. And Tessa, the sparkly one, had lost her shine entirely, reduced to a trembling heap of glitter and shame. Marcus and I exchanged a quiet, satisfied glance. Mission accomplished. The reveal wasn't just satisfying, it was victorious. We had turned their fantasy into a living nightmare without shouting, without chaos, just with raised eyebrows and a shared sense of dark humor. Justice had been served cold, and with a side of French fries because even revenge tastes better with the right snack. The aftermath of the Parisian gala was, unsurprisingly, a glorious train wreck. Daniel, ever the damage control enthusiast, tried to salvage what was left of his reputation, which by then had all the structural integrity of a souffle after a car crash. He called, he begged. He even sent a bouquet of I'm sorry flowers that reeked of regret and discount cologne. I sent them right back with a note that read, "Keep the flowers. I prefer my apologies in the form of signed divorce papers and an uncontested settlement." Tessa and Marcus's marriage, predictably, collapsed faster than a bargain tent in a hurricane. Marcus and I kept in touch, not romantically. I wasn't about to leap from one dumpster fire to another, but as fellow survivors of the same marital shipwreck. Every few weeks we'd grab coffee, exchange war stories, and share darkly funny observations about the dangers of modern love. Marcus, in his calm and understated way, was as cynical as I was, which made him very good company. He even helped me find a divorce lawyer. Apparently, tech executives are quite handy when it comes to unraveling complicated networks, digital or otherwise. My new normal didn't involve romantic dinners or forced small talk about golf. It was about rediscovering what peace actually felt like. I moved into a smaller apartment, decorated it exactly how I wanted, and signed up for pottery classes, Because nothing says healing quite like shaping clay into vaguely inappropriate sculptures. Of course, everyone had opinions. Margaret, my mother-in-law, tried playing the victim at first. How could you do this to Daniel, Harper? He's devastated. I laughed. Devastated, Margaret? He was devastated when he broke his favorite golf club. This is just an inconvenience. Eventually, she stopped calling. Probably because I started answering the phone with, "Hello. You've reached Harper's house of unsolicited opinions. How may I disappoint you today?" Even Lila, my sister-in-law, came around in the end. Once she saw the full extent of Daniel's deceit, she actually apologized. "I always thought you were just quiet," she admitted during an awkward brunch. "I never realized how much you were paying attention." I winked. "Honey, the quiet ones are always taking notes. And sometimes those notes turn into best-selling memoirs, or, at the very least, an exceptionally juicy divorce case." The entire ordeal taught me a few things. Trust, I discovered, is fragile. It can shatter with one misplaced email. Invisibility, though, can be a secret weapon. When no one's watching you, you're free to observe, to gather, to prepare your grand entrance when the time is right. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-love comes disguised as poetic revenge. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor, a storyteller. A woman who turned heartbreak into a darkly comic work of art. My heart wasn't broken, it was rewired. Stronger, sharper, and definitely more prone to cracking inappropriate jokes at funerals. That experience stripped away all the pretense, the people-pleasing, the good wife mask, the endless apologies. I was just Harper now. Flawed, sarcastic, and fiercely independent. I'd faced betrayal head-on and walked away not unscarred but unbowed, and armed with a killer punchline. Life, I realized, was one absurd scene after another, and the only way to survive it was with sharp wit and perfectly timed humor. Daniel thought he'd erased me from his story. What he never understood was that I was the one holding the pen. I wasn't a side character anymore. I was the author, finally writing the chapter where the protagonist takes center stage, steals the spotlight, and leaves everyone else wondering what just happened. As for the future, it was unwritten, unpredictable, and likely full of new absurdities. But this time I was ready. I had my wit, my sarcasm, and a deep appreciation for the chaos of it all. Because in the end, family isn't who laughs at you. It's who laughs with you. And sometimes the funniest joke is the one you've become.